A very good afternoon to all my dear students. So welcome to today's session, which is meant for chapter number 4, which is audit evidence. Right, students? So this is a lengthy chapter and a very important chapter consisting of around 7 essays. Practical based questions you can get from this chapter, and this chapter along with chapter number 6 has a weightage of 12 to 18%. So very important and interesting also because it is totally practical based chapter, right? Practical situations, basically how to conduct the audit of various how to perform various audit procedures is what is contained in this chapter, how to collect the audit evidence, right? So the topic that I'll be covering today is essay 530, essay 501 and essay 505. And students, before starting for this session for today, I just want to ask you all whether you have done the homework that was given to you in the last session. That is, I asked you to go through the module till page number 4.43. So I hope the same has been done by you. Quickly send in your reply so that we can start with the next topic for this session, the topic scheduled for this session. I'm waiting for your replies. So, good afternoon, Om Gupta, Komal Prajapati. Om is saying that he has done the homework. Others also please reply. So students, when we were doing the earlier part of this chapter in the last session, there was a topic on page number 4.29 that I have left at that moment. So now is the time that we can just take up that topic because that is related to the topic that I'll be starting today. So essay 500 we did in the last session, that is that talks about what? Audit evidence, right? There is a concept given in essay 500 which says that how to select the various items for testing. That is, when the auditor is performing the audit procedures to collect the audit evidence, he'll perform audit procedures on various items of the financial statements. Let's say he has to obtain audit evidence with respect to sales. There are lakhs of, let's say 2 lakh sales transactions. Now, how to select items out of this is what we are discussing. So when the auditor is selecting the items for testing, that can be in 3 ways. Either he can select all items, that is all 2 lakh sales transactions. So these are what? Not rupees, these are what? 2 lakh sales transactions. Right? So either he can select all sales transactions, or he may have a specific, he may select specific items. For example, it can be, you can say selecting high value items. That is, out of these 2 lakh transactions, the transactions which exceed 50,000, this is now in monetary terms. So that can be selected. Or let's say certain sales transactions from few selected parties, which he thinks are risky areas, that he can select. So that is what? Selecting specific items. And the third option that is available for an auditor is what? Audit sampling. And the concerned essay is essay 530, right? And whether he selects any of these methods, whether he selects the combination of any of these methods, it totally depends upon what? Auditor's professional judgment, right? Now, selecting all items, let us just see. It means examining the entire population, and it is appropriate when the population constitute of small number of large value items. So the number of items are less, but the value is high. So auditor may opt for testing all the items. When there is significant risk and other means do not provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Other means, it means that audit sampling or selecting specific items. So if there is significant risk, for example, you can take example of related party transactions here, or the repetitive nature of the calculation or other processes performed by an information system automatically, it makes 100% examination cost effective. See, why an auditor resorts to audit sampling? You all know that it is not efficient to check all the transactions. But let's say the system is such that all the transactions can be checked electronically, and the same is what cost effective also. So in these situations, the auditor may opt for selecting all the items. The second point we just mentioned is, it says that it is unlikely in case of test of controls and common for test of details. See, testing all the internal control, it is, the chances are very less. Why? Because the auditor as such, he is not required to give an opinion on the internal control. But yes, it is common for test of details, that is, he can perform 100% checking of the financial statements. I hope it is clear. This was with respect to what? Selecting all items, and the topic is given in your module on page number 4.29. Now, selecting specific items. So the auditor, when he's selecting the items to be selected, the various factors that are relevant for the auditor's assessment is what? Auditor's understanding of the entity. See, first of all, you'll understand the entity, na? For example, sales transaction. So you'll understand now whether the sales transaction, it includes what import, the exports also, or only local domestic sales are there. So auditor is going to understand the entity, assess the risk of material misstatement, and characteristics of the population. Based on this assessment, auditor will determine the specific items that are to be tested. And those specific items can be like high value items. I gave you example that transactions exceeding 50,000, or let's say the key items, that is, let's say certain sales transaction related to a particular group of your debtors, right? Then all items over certain amount, and items to obtain certain information. For example, the auditor wants to check sales transaction with respect to few particular parties. So specific items he can select in that way also. So criteria can be what? High value or the key items, then all items over certain amount, or items to obtain certain kind of information. Is it clear? The third option that is available is what? Audit sampling. And this is what we are going to do in detail, that is essay 530. So quickly send in your replies. What do you think? Is audit sampling mandatory for an auditor to follow when he's conducting the audit of a client organization? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies. Students, I'm waiting for your replies. So please send in your replies on the where my name is mentioned in small letters. Swati is saying it is up to auditor discretion. Kiran Bala is saying no. Others also please reply. So it is not mandatory. It all depends upon what? Auditor's professional judgment, right? Now let us start with audit sampling. There I'll be discussing this in detail with you. Audit sampling, and the relevant essay is what? Essay 530. And the name is what? Very simple. It is what? Audit sampling. Right? Now quickly tell me, what do you understand by the term sampling? Sampling. Quickly send in your replies. See, if you look at the dictionary meaning of the term sampling, it means the action or the process of taking samples of something for analysis, right? Or selection of suitable sample for a study, right? And sample can be what? A small part or quantity intended to show what the whole is like what the whole population is like. So this is basically what? The dictionary meaning. You need not as such study or learn this. This is just for your understanding. And this we have seen, right? That selecting all items, selecting specific items, or audit sampling. Now, if you look at the definition of the term audit sampling as per essay 530, it means application of audit procedures to less than 100% of items within a population relevant under audit, such that all the sampling units have equal chance of selection. So we took an example of what? 2 lakhs sales transaction. Right? And this is what number of transactions. Right? So this is the entire population which is relevant under audit, entire sales population, right? So what is the population? Population is what? The entire set of data from which a sample is selected. So out of these 2 lakhs, see, if I'm an auditor of this company and 2 lakhs are the sales transaction, and I decide that, okay, I'll be doing the examination of sales transaction on a sample basis. So I'll be selecting a sample out of these 2 lakh transactions. So the entire set of transactions from which a sample is selected and about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusions. So about the sales transaction, I want to know whether these are properly accounted for in the books of accounts, whether they reflect a true and fair view. That what? The sales transactions. So the entire set of data of sales transaction is what? Population. Right? Now, what is sample? Just what is sampling unit? Just so sampling unit are the individual items that make up the population. So the individual sales transaction that is making up the entire 2 lakh transactions of sales is what? The sampling unit. And out of these sampling unit only, I'm going to select the sample. Based on the samples, the audit procedures are going to be applied on these sampling units only. Conclusions will be drawn based on the audit procedure applied on the samples, and those conclusions will be projected on the entire population. That is, conclusion on the sample will become the conclusion of the population. Is it clear? Is it clear? Now, when we study about population, the term population, it should have 3 characteristics. So when I'm taking the sales of 2 lakh numbers of sales transaction, that entire population should be what? Appropriate. It should be complete, and it should be what? Reliable. Is it clear? Is it clear? Quickly send in your replies. So let us just have a look at the features, the characteristics of the population that is given in your module. So this is on page number 4.46. So the characteristics are what? Appropriateness, then completeness, and reliable. See, the population that has been selected, that should be appropriate for the specific audit objective, right? So whatever is the objective. So in our case, in our example, the objective of the auditor is to see whether the sales transaction are duly accounted for in the books of accounts of the client. So the population so selected should be what? It should be appropriate. It should be relevant for the specific audit purpose. Why? Because out of that population, the samples will be drawn. And on those samples, the audit procedures will be performed. And whatever results will be achieved with respect to the sample, the same will be projected on the entire population, right? So this example says that if the auditor's objective were to test for overstatement of accounts receivable, the population could be defined as the accounts receivable listing. So see students, let's say the auditor has to check whether the trade receivables that are shown, whether these are overstated or not. So what will be the population? What he'll do, he'll take a list of all the trade receivables and he'll check the various aspects relating to the genuineness. That is, there should be no fake sales transaction that has been recorded. So what will become my population for testing? It will be the trade receivables, a list of all the trade receivables. There I'll check the genuineness and I'll be able to know about whether the same has been overstated or not. But see, if the auditor has to check the understatement of trade receivable, then taking the population as the list of all the trade receivable will not give me the desired result. That is, it is not the appropriate population. Why? Because see, if I want to see that whether there is understatement of any trade receivable, then what I can see subsequent disbursements. Because from those subsequent disbursements, I can see whether any unrecorded sales transaction is there or not. I can see unpaid invoices, supplier statement, because understated means the same has not been recorded. So looking at the recorded figures won't give me the desired result. So here my population will be what? See, on the other hand, when testing the understatement of accounts payable, the population would not be accounts payable listing, but rather subsequent disbursement, unpaid invoices, supplier statement, unmatched receiving reports, or other populations that provide the evidence with respect to what? Understatement. I hope this is clear. Because we have to see understatement, and understatement means the same has not been recorded. So how can I get the desired result? By looking at the recorded sales trade receivable. So if I have to look at the overstatement, then it will be what? The listing of trade receivables. But if I have to look at the understatement, then whatever subsequently happened, so out of that I can trace as to what has not been recorded. Right? Is it clear? So this is with respect to appropriateness. Then the next topic is what? The population should be what? Complete. Right? So unless and until the population is complete, I cannot get the desired result. Why? Because out of the complete population, I'm going to have the sample. On the sample, I'm going to apply the audit procedures, and the result will be then projected on the entire population. And if the population is not complete, then the specific audit objectives will not be received. So it mentions that if population is complete in all respects, the conclusions drawn on the population will be considered to be reasonable. I hope this is clear. Then is what? Reliable. See, unless and until I'm sure that the 2 lakh sales transactions from which I'm taking the sample, if I'm not sure about the reliability of such data, will I be able to apply my audit procedure sampling techniques? No, right? So the nature and the source of the population should be such that it should be reliable. Then only it will be relevant for the specific audit objective. So it is mentioned here that auditor should obtain evidence about the reliability of population. If population is not reliable with respect to accuracy and source, the sample drawn will definitely not be relevant for the specific audit objective. So I hope it is clear. Students, I hope this topic, which is what? Characteristics of the population, which should be what? It should be appropriate, complete, and reliable. Right? What is sampling unit? Just a minute. So we all have seen that the individual items that make up the population is what? The sampling units. And the audit procedures are applied on these units, and conclusions drawn from them are projected on the entire population. Right? In simple words, conclusions drawn from sample becomes the conclusions of the population from where it is drawn. Just read this example of sampling units. It says that if the auditor's objective were to test the validity of accounts receivable, the sampling unit could be defined as customer balances or individual customer invoices. The auditor defines the sampling unit in order to obtain an efficient and effective sample to achieve the particular audit objective. So is it clear? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly, students. Send in your replies. Send in your replies. I'm not getting your replies. So, students are saying, yes, ma'am, it is clear. Students on Zoom who all are taking the session, please send in your replies on the ID whereby my name is mentioned in small letters. Okay, ठीक है. Right. So now, students, if I ask you a question that if the auditor goes for, let's say, the traditional method of routine checking, then what, in your understanding, are various disadvantages associated with routine checking, right? See, when the auditor, let's say, he resorts to 100% checking. So here he'll be conducting routine checking, ignoring the concept of materiality. Ignoring the concept of materiality. Also, it is economically wasteful. Why? Because the resources, the time and team of the audit team, it will get devoted to maybe the things, the transactions which are not relevant as such, right? Because he's doing what? Routine checking, checking all the transaction without any exception. That is, without giving any importance or significance that is required to be given to any transaction, right? Further, also, students, nowadays, since internal controls are implemented, so the chances that there are routine errors of fraud, this get diminished, right? So that is why nowadays the auditors are expected to, follow some methods, but that should be applied following the standards also. So when we say that, we have seen there are two other methods that the auditor can select, that is selecting the specific items or audit sampling. Now, when the auditor is selecting the specific item, he is just applying his judgment and he is not as such following any method. But when auditor follows sampling techniques, then obviously he is going to get a better result. So that is why there is a concept of audit sampling. This entire concept relating to traditional checking, that is 100% checking, or the non-consequential routine checking, this is given on page number 4.44. I have given a review of it as to what are the various disadvantages and why the concept of audit sampling is there, right? So, what is the objective of the auditor as per SA 530? It is to provide a reasonable basis to draw conclusion about the entire population from which sample is selected. So when the sample is selected, audit procedures are applied on it. It provides a reasonable basis to the auditor to draw conclusions about the population from which the sample is selected. Is it clear? Is it clear? Right? Now, sampling, SA 530 deals with both types of sampling, that is statistical and non-statistical. Now, what is meant by statistical sampling and what is meant by non-statistical sampling? This we are going to do, and whether the auditor will opt for statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling, it again depends upon what auditor's professional judgment. So we are on page number 4.48 of your module, right? So before considering as to statistical and what statistical sampling is and what non-statistical sampling is, see, very, very important that the sample that the auditor is going to select out of, let's say in our case, the 2 lakh number of sales transactions, then the sample must be what? It must be representative of the entire population. So you cannot say that in case of statistical sampling, the sample must be representative. However, in case of non-statistical sampling, the same may not be representative. Whatever may be the approach, non-statistical or statistical, the sample must be representative. This means that it must be closely similar to the whole population, although not necessarily exactly the same. the sample must be large enough to provide statistically meaningful results, right? And this, the auditor, based on his experience, his knowledge, he selects a sample that is apt, that is significant, that will give significantly meaningful results, right? And you all are already aware the sampling can be applied while the auditor is performing test of control. That is when he is identifying whether any deviation are there with respect to expected internal control, or when he's applying what test of details, that is to identify the misstatement from the account balances or the class of transaction. And this I have told you in the last class that when there is a difference from the expected internal control and the actual performance of the internal control, that is called what? Deviation. But with respect to financial statement, we use the term what? Misstatement, right? For internal control, we use the term deviation, right? So the two approaches for sampling are what? Statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. So as the name suggests, statistical sampling. So it is basically the sampling whereby the selection is based on what? There is what? Random selection of sample units. Randomly, these are selected. It can be by using the random number tables or computers. So random selection of sampling units is there, and use of probability theory to evaluate the sample results is there. Lastly, it includes measurement of sampling risk. See, statistical sampling, as the name suggests. So certain formulas, certain probability theories, the precise measurement is possible here. So approach to sampling that has random selection of sampling units, use of probability theory to evaluate sample results, and including measurement of sampling risk characteristic is what? Statistical sampling. It is more scientific. It uses mathematical laws of probability. It has a wide application where there are large number of similar items. And see, since the samples are randomly selected, use of computers is there, use of random number table is there. So there is no personal bias, and it is more particularly used whereby in the larger organization with huge transactions. So I hope it is clear, and it is quite simple also. Now, non-statistical sampling, as the name suggests here, the sample size as well as to what will constitute the sample, the amount of sample and what will constitute the sample, it is based on what? Personal experience and knowledge of the auditor, right? Just a minute. So it is going to depend upon what? The personal experience and knowledge of the auditor. It is common, it is simple. And when the auditor is applying his personal experience and knowledge, when he's selecting the sample or the composition, see, he is applying his knowledge, right? So he will attempt to avoid any pattern of selection. So when he's selecting the items, he'll make sure that some common pattern is not being followed. For example, let's say when he's selecting the sample, it should not happen that every first 5 transaction of every month is getting selected. So attempt to avoid a pattern of selection is there. Element of surprise is also there, that the client should not become aware that these are the auditor and they select only these items, first 10 transaction of every month. No, there should be some element of surprise, and checking large number of items towards the close of the year. So practically, see, common hai na, and practically when the auditor is applying non-statistical sampling, there is a tendency of the auditor to check large number of transactions near the close of the year. Why? Because chances are there that manipulations or any misstatement or maybe due to error or fraud are more with respect to the year-end transaction. Simple. Is it simple? Are you able to understand? But see, non-statistical sampling, it has certain disadvantages, right? Since there is what? Personal, the auditor is selecting the sample size based on personal experience. So it is neither objective nor scientific. Risk of personal bias is also always there, and chances are there that the sample may not be representative of the entire population. So which method the auditor is going to select? Again, it depends upon the auditor's professional judgment. Now, there is a topic on page number 4.50, which is sampling versus traditional method of auditing. So I've briefed you as to what is contained here. So this is this topic I am giving you as a homework to go through the module, right? Now I'm doing a topic on page number 4.51, which says that there are certain factors. So we say that the auditor applies his professional judgment when he's selecting the sample or when he's selecting the sample size. Now, when the auditor, be it statistical or non-statistical sampling, when the auditor decides as to what should be the extent of checking, that is, what should be the sample size. So there are certain factors that he needs to consider. See, size of the organization, but like very logical, na? State of the internal control. If the internal controls are not good, maybe the sample size that he's going to take will be high. Adequacy and reliability of books and records. Tolerable error range. So tolerable error range is what? How much misstatement is not material as per the auditor's understanding. So tolerable error range. See, the tolerable error range is high. Small sample will also be fine. But if the tolerable error range is low, then auditor is going to have what? Higher sample size. Then the degree of desired confidence. If auditor wants to be 100%, he wants to have a greater degree of confidence, then obviously the higher sample size is going to select. So very simple topic, right? Let me just have a look at the queries if you all have. So is it clear? Kiran Bala is saying, ma'am, clear. Amrit Chaudhary is saying clear. Bhumika is saying clear. Sukaina is saying yes. Swati, Sayan Kumar Das, all are saying, ma'am, it's clear. Yes, Sukaina, I can see your messages. If I have missed any of your queries, you can resend it. So I hope this topic is clear. Right? Now, appropriateness of sampling approach. This is our next topic. So if I ask you, I need quick answers now. We have seen as to what is the statistical approach. We have also seen what is non-statistical approach, right? Now, if I ask you about the various advantages of statistical approach, quickly send in your replies. Do not look at the book or the screen. Now I've changed the screen. Quickly send in your replies. So, Sukaina is saying, ma'am, mathematical. Swati is saying accuracy. Others also please reply. Others also please reply. No bias. Sukaina is saying, Kiran Bala is saying more scientific. Yes. So these are the various advantages associated with the statistical approach. See, mathematical laws like your law of probability are applied. Then risk is also measurable here. Personal bias is not here. So all these features of statistical sampling leads to certain advantages of statistical sampling. So first of all, the results are measurable with adequacy and reliability. Sample size does not increase in proportion to increase in size of the area to be tested, right? Sample selection is objective as well as defensible. So objective is what? Here personal bias is not involved. And defensible, see later on, if let's say there is allegation against the auditor that he was negligent when he was selecting sample size. So he can always say, see, it is a statistical approach. I use the probability theory. I use the various formulae. So it is what? Defensible. Minimum sample size can be taken. Calculated risk and corresponding precision. So I told you that risk can also be calculated precisely. Better description for a large mass of data. So if the volume of transaction is high, so statistical is more advisable, and it is widely accepted, more scientific, because there is no personal bias. So I hope these all points are clear and very simple also. Is it clear? Is it clear? So yes, I can see there are replies that, ma'am, the topic is clear, right? Now, so when the auditor is following the sampling technique, sampling approach, there is a process that has been given by SA 530. And first of all, according to this process, the auditor is going to decide the sample design, then the sample size, then the sample selection method, audit approaches that are to be applied, nature and cause of deviation and misstatement, deviation with respect to the internal control and misstatement with respect to what? Financial statement, projecting misstatement, and evaluating the results of the audit sampling. Is it clear? So now the topic that is left in our SA 530 is to discuss all these points in detail one by one. So before that, quickly send in your replies that whatever we have done, that is what is audit sampling as per SA 530, the definition of the term population, the characteristics, the definition of the term sampling unit. Then we saw that sample must be representative. Then we saw that sampling techniques can be applied when the auditor is performing test of controls, or when he is checking the, when he is performing substantive procedure, that is test of details. And then we saw statistical sampling as well as non-statistical sampling, along with certain advantages of statistical sampling. Quickly send in your replies whether it is clear. So Sayan, Amrit, they are saying it is clear. So Sukaina, see, let's say there is a population of 1,000 items. And in the, let's say when I'm selecting the sample, I have asked for 10 samples that are to be selected out of this population, right? And since no personal bias is there, 10 sample size that will be selected, they will be representative of this 1,000 population of 1,000 units, right? Now, let's say the population is 5,000 units and still I want 10 samples also. Since these are scientifically using the mathematical theories, these are selected, these will again be representative of this entire population. So is it clear, Sukaina? Let me just have a look at her query. Sukaina, okay. So she's saying it is clear, right? So we'll be starting with the next topic, which is what? Sample design. So sample design is basically affected by various factors, like what is the specific purpose for which the sample is to be selected, what audit procedures are to be applied, what combination of audit procedures are to be applied, right? What is the nature of audit evidence that the auditor wants to consider, and he will also see the expected rate of deviation and misstatement. Further, the auditor is when the auditor is designing the sample, he'll see that whether the population is complete or not. Why? Because sample design, based on the sample which he is going to design here, the audit procedures will be applied on these sample only, and that he's going to project on the entire population, right? So unless and until we have seen that the population should be appropriate, complete, and reliable, so unless and until the population is complete, the sample design will not be correct. Is it clear? Is it clear? So let me just take you through this topic from the module. The topic is, this is given on page number 4.53, sample design. So when the auditor is designing the sample, The auditor's consideration include what specific purpose the auditor wants to achieve. So if you remember, if we have to see the overstatement, then the trade receivable listing will become the sample. So all the items out of that population will be included in the sample design. And if the auditor wants to check the understatement, then the population is going to be the different, right? So the auditor's consideration includes the specific purpose to be achieved and the combination of audit procedure that is likely to best achieve that purpose. So what combination of audit procedures the auditor is going to apply? The nature of audit evidence that is required, and auditor will also consider as to what is deviation, what is the possible misstatement, and what actually the population is, right? And lastly, it says that when performing audit sampling, the auditor performs audit procedure to obtain audit evidence that the population from which audit evidence is drawn is what? Complete. So we have seen all these 3 points, right? Is it clear? So in the test of details relating to the existence of account receivable, such as confirmation, payments made by customer before the confirmation date but received shortly after the date by the client are not considered as misstatement. Also, wrong posting between customer accounts do not reflect the total accounts receivable balance. See, what example is given here is, if you just read this point, so it says that what is the expected rate of deviation or what is a misstatement, auditor needs to consider it when he's designing a sample, right? Auditor needs to consider what will be the population, what will be the deviation, what will be the misstatement, what is the specific purpose, what the combination of audit procedures, and whether the population is complete or not, right? So this example says basically that auditor should be aware as to what a misstatement is. So let's say a confirmation request is sent to one of the trade receivables, though the payment is received shortly after the date of that confirmation. So will that become a misstatement? Just read this. In a test of details relating to existence of account receivable, such as confirmation, payments made by the customer before the confirmation date, but received shortly after that date, that is the date when the confirmation is sent by the client, are not considered as misstatement. So it basically says that the auditor must be aware as to what a misstatement will be, what a deviation will be. Then only he'll be able to design a proper sample for which on which he has to apply his audit procedures. Is it clear? Is it clear? Now the next topic in sample design is what? Stratification and value weighted. This topic, students, I'll take up later on when we will be doing various methods of sampling, right? Now, let us discuss the next topic, which is what? Sample size. We all have seen that the sample size depends upon what? The auditor's professional judgment. Just a minute. So, auditor will determine as to what will be the sample size. See, when the auditor is selecting the units, so we took example of what? 2 lakh. So, 2 lakh was number of sales transactions. So out of this, how many transactions the auditor is going to check on a sample basis? Will it be 10,000? Will it be 1,000? Will it be 100 transactions? So it basically depends. The sample size should be such that it should be able to reduce the sampling risk. See, when the auditor is checking any kind of transactions on the sample basis, sampling risk will be there. Now, what is meant by sampling risk? If you remember, we have done this in the earlier chapter also, that the result that the auditor is obtaining by applying the procedures on the sample is different from the result that he would have obtained if those procedures would have been applied on the entire population, right? So the result that the auditor obtained when he applied the audit procedure on the sample of, let's say, 1,000 transactions, it is different from his conclusion that he would have drawn if all those audit procedure would have been applied to the entire population. This is what sampling risk. So the sample size that the auditor is going to select, it should be such that it should reduce the sampling risk to an acceptably low level. Is it clear? So quickly tell me, if the auditor wants to really reduce the sample size, if he wants to get lower sampling risk, what should be the sample size? Is it will be more or less? So Swati is saying it will be more. Yamini is saying it will be more. More. See, if the auditor wants to really reduce the sampling risk, what does that mean? That auditor is going to have a greater sample size, right? So he will have to increase his checking. So instead of, let's say, 1,000 transactions that we were taking as an example, that he was taking 1,000 sales transaction. Let's say if he want to reduce his his sampling risk, then the auditor is now going to take a larger sample, that is, let's say, 10,000 transactions. Quickly tell me, sampling risk is a part of what kind of risk? We have done this in the earlier chapter. So this is a test of your understanding of the earlier chapters. Quickly send in your replies. Detection, Swati, absolutely correct. Detection, Sukaina, absolutely correct, right? Komalpreet, Kiran Bala, absolutely correct. Detection risk. Okay, and there we have understood about sampling risk also, right? Now, the sample size that the auditor is going to take, again, it can be based on certain formula or it can be decided by the auditor's professional judgment. Now, there are various factors that determines the sample size. So I'll be asking you the various factors and you will be giving me the answers. So when the auditor is checking the internal controls, that he is checking the internal controls on sample basis, tell me if there is an increase in the extent to which auditor's risk assessment takes into account relevant controls. Tell me what will be the effect on the sample size? It means that if the auditor's reliance on internal control, it is going to be increased. Then tell me what is going to be the sample size? So Om Gupta is saying more. Swati is saying more. Others, please check your answers. So my question is that auditor is checking the internal controls on sample basis because he is going to rely on the internal controls, right? Now, with respect to certain transaction, let's say with respect to sales transaction, he is going to rely more on the operating effectiveness on the internal control. That is, there will be more reliance on the internal control. Now, here the sample size I'm talking is with respect to internal control. तो internal control को कितना check करना है? Quickly send in your replies. Sukaina, Kiran Bala, I hope now this concept is clear. I'm not talking about the sample size with respect to financial statements. I'm saying the sample size of the internal control. Because Abhi, he is checking. See, what is the topic? Examples of factors influencing sample size of test of control. So if there is going to be more reliance on the internal control, then he's going to take a larger sample size of the internal control that he's going to check. Increase in the tolerable rate of deviation. So the auditor is okay with a higher level of deviation also. So here, See, I'm talking about checking of internal controls. Audit is checking the internal controls on sample basis. So here his sample of internal control will be more or less. Quickly send in your replies. So you may write 2 and whatever is your answer. There is an increase in the tolerable rate of deviation. So Kiran Bala, Sukaina, Komalpreet, absolutely correct. It is going to reduce. Right? Is it clear? So Om is saying ma'am's second is less. Absolutely correct. An increase in the expected rate of deviation of the population to be tested. So the auditor has assessed that there is an increase in the expected rate of deviation of the population to be tested. So here the sample size will be what? It will be, quickly send in reply, just write 3 and your answer. So Bhumika is saying large, Komalpreet is saying more. Yamini is saying more, Kiran Bala is saying more, Swati is saying more, which is absolutely correct. See why? Because here auditor has seen that there is an increase in the expected rate of deviation. Expected chances are there that the deviation will be more. So he'll do what? More checking. So a larger sample size. Om is saying more, which is absolutely correct. An increase in auditor's desired level of assurance that the tolerable rate of deviation is not exceeded by the actual rate of deviation in the population. So an increase in the auditor's desired level of assurance. He wants more assurance. So more the assurance is required, larger will be the checking. That is the sample size is going to be more. An increase in the number of sampling units in the population. So is it going to have any impact on the sample size? So it is going to have a negligible effect because an increase in the number of sampling units in the population. So just have a look at this point from your module. So we are on page number 4.58. In case of larger populations, the actual size of the population has little, if any, effect on sample size. For small populations, however, audit sampling may not be as efficient as an alternative means of obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Why? Because in case of small population, checking of all the controls or all the transactions is possible. Therefore, there will be negligible effect on sample size due to increase in the number of sampling units in the population. So I hope it is clear. So this was with respect to internal control, whereby we use the term of what? Deviation. Now the next topic is also similar, but here we are talking about what? Test of details, right? So the following are factors that the auditor may consider when determining the sample size of test of details. These factors which need to be considered together assume the auditor does not modify the approach to test of control or otherwise modify the nature or timing of substantive procedure in responses to the assessed risk. So I have made a table for this also. So here we are talking about what? Test of details. Right? Example of factors influencing sample size for test of details. So if there is an increase in auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement, the sample size will be, just write 1 and your answer. Sample size will be, so if the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement is high, he's going to increase the checking, that is higher sample size. So let me just have a look at the answers. So Kiran Bala is saying more, Bhumika is saying more, Yamini is saying more, Swati, Komalpreet, Sukaina, all are correct. Everyone has said more. Right? The second point, an increase in the use of other substantive procedure directed at the same assertion. Let me just explain this point, then you send the answers. It basically says that, let's say with respect to one particular class of transactions, auditor apply some other audit procedures also. right? So with respect to this particular audit procedure that he wants to check, what will be the impact on the sample size? See, an increase in the use of other substantive procedures directed at the same assertion. So let's say with respect to trade receivable, auditor is obtaining external confirmation also. He's obtaining the aging of the trade receivables from the management also, and he's performing various other procedures also. So what is going to be the impact on the sample size with respect to the substantive procedure that he was performing, apart from the other audit procedures that he has already performed? So send in your replies. Just write second. So Komal Preet is saying yes, which is correct. Kiran Bala is absolutely correct. Komal Preet, Sukaina, Yamini, Swati, absolutely correct. So I hope you are able to understand this now. Then the third says, an increase in auditor's desired level of assurance that tolerable misstatement is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. So we have seen this when we were doing test of controls also. So the sample size is going to increase when auditor wants to have an increased desired level of assurance. Increase in tolerable misstatement. So here, see, it is just the opposite. So here the auditor's tolerable level of misstatement has increased. So less checking will also be fine. Is it clear? So let me just have a look at the answers that you are sharing. So for fourth, send in your reply for fourth point. So Sukaina is saying less. Yamini is saying less. So there is a doubt. Let me just take that doubt first. Whose doubt is this? Swati Singh, ma'am, please explain third point once again. Okay. So this third point says that, see, just read this with me. An increase in the auditor's desired level of assurance that tolerable misstatement is not exceeded by actual misstatement in the population. See, when we were doing essay 320 materiality, we discussed about the tolerable misstatement, whereby I told you that performance materiality which the auditor determines, it is also what the tolerable level of misstatement, right? So it basically says that if there is an increase in the desired level of assurance that the auditor wants. So if you just read this till here, so basically higher confidence the auditor wants, more confidence he wants with respect to particular class of transactions. So जितना ज़्यादा confidence चाहिए उतना ज़्यादा work चाहिएगा ना, so the sample size is going to increase. Further, the explanation says an increase in the desired level of assurance that tolerable misstatement, that is the level of misstatement that is acceptable or tolerable, is not exceeded by actual misstatement in the population. So auditor wants to make sure that the tolerable level of misstatement, this should not be exceeded by actual misstatement. So how can he be sure about this? By increasing the sample size. Now, how can he have the more assurance with respect to particular class of transaction? By taking a larger sample of that class of transaction. Swati, is it clear? Swati, send in your reply. She's saying yes, ma'am. So now the fifth point, an increase in the amount of misstatement that auditor expects to find in the population. Tell me, the auditor sample will be more or less. So just write 5 and your answer. So Komal Preet, Om Krishna, Swati, Yamini, Bhumika, Sukaina, absolutely correct. It will be more. If auditor expects that the amount of misstatement is going to be more, he'll increase his sample size. Stratification of the population when appropriate. This I'll take up when we will be doing this stratification topic. And last is what? The number of sampling units within the population. So again, it is going to have what? Negligible effect. right? Is it clear? Is it clear? Now, selecting of items for testing. So basically, we are now going to start with the topic sample selection methods. So this is just a summary that the auditor should select the sample in such a way that each sampling unit in the population should have a chance of selection. And statistical sampling में तो each sampling unit has a known probability of being selected. However, non-statistical sampling में auditor is going to use what? Judgment. So whether he is going to use statistical sampling or whether he is going to use non-statistical sampling, the sample drawn must be representative so that reasonable basis can be drawn to can be used to can be obtained to draw conclusions with respect to the entire population, and the sample should be representative and bias should be avoided. So in basically this is a summary about the sampling process that we have done so far, right? So the various methods of sample selection that we are going to do here is what? Random sampling, systematic sampling, monetary unit sampling, haphazard sampling, and block sampling. So this monetary unit sampling is also what? Your evaluated selection, which was a topic that I have liked. So I'll be covering that here. And when we will be doing random sampling, so we'll be covering a topic of stratified sampling. So stratification I have left earlier. So I'll be covering it here. And out of these five sample selection methods, random sampling, systematic sampling, and your haphazard sampling, this first, this second, and this third, these are commonly used. These are generally used, right? Is it clear? So let us start with what? Your random sampling. Quickly send in your replies. What according to you is meant by random sampling? Quickly send in your replies. Randomly. So we are on page number 4.61. I'm waiting for your replies. See, random sampling can be of two types: simple random sampling and stratified sampling, right? I'm taking this topic from your module. So random sampling, it basically ensures that all items in the populations or within each stratum. So within the population is when simple random sampling is followed, and within each stratum means when stratified sampling has been followed, have a known chance of selection. It may use the simple random number tables, and it is of two types, which is what? Simple random sampling and stratified sampling, right? So let's say there is a population of, let's say, 1,000 items. So randomly using, let's say, certain random number tables, that okay, fifth item is selected, then 10th item is selected, using some random number tables, or using, let's say, computers, those random selection has been done. So, or nowadays you see that when you play tambola using the cell phones also, the numbers are randomly generated. So random number generated. So it is today it is mentioned here. Random numbers are also generated using various application on cell phones like the random number generator. So this is what? Simple random sampling. So under this method, each unit of the whole population, example purchases or sales, have equal chance of being selected. It is considered that random number tables are simple, easy to use, and also provide assurance that auditors' bias does not affect the selection. Why? Because if he's using the random number table, or let's say using the random number generator, so randomly without applying his judgment, he's applying without the auditor's bias, the samples get selected. Each item in a population is selected by using random number table, either with the help of computer or picking up a number in a random way, maybe randomly from a drum, like your lucky draw types. So random selection, and this is what the simple random sampling. This method is considered appropriate provided the population to be sampled consists of reasonably simple units or fall within the reasonable range. See, just take an example. Let's say there are 1,000 sales transactions ranging from the example that is given, I'm taking the same 55,000 to let's say 2 lakhs, right? So kind of similar transactions are there. Vis-a-vis, take a situation whereby the transactions range from 500 to let's say 10 lakhs. So let's say if the simple random sampling is done, then it can be possible na, that few transactions which are just lower in amount are selected and no higher value item gets selected. So that is why it says that it is appropriate for a kind of population which consists of similar items. So what method to apply here? Though random sampling can be applied in this situation also, but here it is advisable to use what? Stratified random sampling. So I hope random sampling and simple random sampling is clear. Simple random sampling. Quickly send in your replies. Send in your replies. So many of you are saying clear. Okay. Now what is meant by stratification? Just a minute. So what is meant by stratification? So let's say the population, that is, let's take the example of trade receivables. It consists of 500 to, this is rupees 500 to rupees, let's say 10 lakhs. Right? Now, if the auditor applies simple random sampling, and the random number generator, it generates, let's say, 1,000 invoice. There can be possibility that the transaction of higher value are not selected. So what is the solution? I told you the solution is what? Stratified random sampling. So here what auditor can do is, let's say this is 10 lakh to 10 lakh 50,000, right? So auditor may stratify this data. That is, he may divide the entire set of population, entire set of trade receivable data into, let's say, 4 parts. So balances which exceeds 10 lakhs. And then you can say from 7 lakh 75,000, which is, just a minute, ranging from 7 lakh 75,000 to, let's say, 10 lakhs. Then ranging from your 5 lakh 50,000 to 7.75, and this can be written as 001, right? And then it can be ranging from your 2 lakh 25,000 001 to 5 lakh 50,000, and then less than 2 lakh 25,000. Right? Is it clear? So now here what auditor can decide that with respect to balances which are more than 10 lakhs, I'll test all the items. With respect to these range, so here also auditor has selected to test all the items. Here, let's say auditor decides to take a sample of, let's say, from here a sample of 90%. Why? Because these are high value items. From here, let's say he decides to check 10% of the transactions. Same way here, let's say he decides to check 30% of the transaction. And here, let's say he decides to check what? 40% of what? These transactions. 90% of what? These transactions. 10% of what? These transactions. So the sample will be drawn using the random number tables only. But now the data is what? Stratified. right? So now whatever sample he'll get it from the higher value transactions also, and in fact with respect to all kind of transactions. Why? Because now the data is divided into various groups, that is, it is divided into various stratums. So let us just have a look at this from your module. This method involves dividing the whole population to be tested in few separate groups called strata and taking a sample from each of them. Each stratum is treated as if it was a separate population, and if proportionate of items are selected from each of these stratum. The number of groups into which the population is divided, it depends upon the auditor's judgment, right? So this was the example. So here it is clearly mentioned. See, balances in excess of 10 lakhs, balances in the range of 7,75,001 to 10 lakhs, these range. From these above groups, so is it required that equal percentages is to be checked from all the groups? So the answer is no. From these above groups, the auditor may pick up different percentages of item from each of the group. From the top group, balance in excess of 10 lakhs, the auditor may examine all the items. From the second group, 25%. From the third group, 10%. From the lowest group, 2%. Random sample is chosen from each stratum using the random number tables. But now, since the selection is from each stratum, all the samples taken together are going to be a true representative of the entire population, right? Why? Because the sample that is taken from any group is representative of that group. So all the samples taken together are what? They have the feature of the entire population. So the reasoning behind stratified sampling is that for a highly diversified population, weight should be allocated to reflect these differences. So weights are given that 100% checking for transaction exceeding 10 lakhs, 25% with respect to transaction up to 10 lakhs, in excess of 10, for the second group, 10% with respect to the third group. So weights are given. This is achieved by selecting different proportions from each strata. It can be seen that stratified sampling is simply an extension of your simple random sampling. And what is the definition of stratification? It means dividing the heterogeneous is different population into homogeneous. Homogeneous is having similar or having similar characteristics subpopulation, where samples are drawn for each subpopulation. So quickly tell me, is it clear? Random sampling, whereby we have discussed what? Simple random sampling and stratified sampling. Is it clear? The next topic is interval sampling. So quickly send in your replies. So Amrit is saying clear, Om is saying clear. Others also please reply. Komal Preet is saying clear. Swati is saying clear. Now interval. Interval sampling or systematic sampling. So see how interval sampling or systematic sampling, how samples are selected here. Just so let's say there are 1,000 transactions that are to be checked, right? Now the auditor wants, let's say, the sample size of, let's say, 50 transactions. So what he'll do, he'll divide the entire population by the sample size that he wants. So here it comes out to be 20. So this is what the sampling interval. So now every 20th item will get selected. So interval sampling. Now the first unit will be selected, let's say, using the random number table. So suppose the 5th unit gets selected as the first unit. Now every 20th, that is 25th, adding 20 here is what? 45th. Adding 20 is what? 65th. So like this, the units at the specific sampling interval will get selected. So this is the way of what? Interval sampling or systematic sampling. So systematic selection is the selection method in which number of sampling units in the population, we took 1000, is divided by the sample size to give a sampling interval. So the sampling size was, let's say, 50 in our case, so 20th. For example, let's read this example, 50. And having determined a starting point within this 50, so it can be selected by using what? Maybe random number. Each 50th item thereafter is selected. Although the starting point may be determined haphazardly, the sample is more likely to be truly random if it is determined by use of computerized random number generator or the random number tables. Is it clear? Is it clear? Right? Now it says that if in a population, see, there are certain disadvantages, or you can say certain negative aspect of this interval sampling. So let's say the interval decided is 50th and every 50th item is selected. And by chance, the invoices that are there, every 50th item pertains to one particular trade receivable. So a set pattern is established now. So let us just have a read at this. When using systematic selection, the auditor would need to determine that sampling units within the population are not structured in such a way that sampling interval corresponds to a particular pattern in the population. For example, if a population of branch sales, particular branch sales occur on every 100th item and sampling interval selected is 100, the results would be that either the auditor would select all or none of the sales of that particular branch. So auditor should make sure that the population as such is not following a particular set pattern. Is it clear? You can read this second example also at home. So to minimize the effect of the possible known bias through a pattern in the population, more than one starting point may be taken. So it can be possible na, that let's say 50th item is selected. So now 100th item gets selected. Now 150th item. Now let's say here change. Let us just change the starting point. So here now the starting point is what? 196th item. So now 50 will be added here on in the 196th item. Is it clear? Is it clear? Om is saying clear, Simon is saying clear, right? Now the next is what? Monetary unit or value weighted. So the way we have discussed about the interval sampling, whereby we were selecting the sample by dividing the entire population by the sample size that is required, and then on every 50th item we were selecting that. In monitoring unit sampling, all these processes carried out, but here the population will be in monetary units. So you will here not say that 1000 transactions, but here the monitoring units will be 10 lakh rupees or whatever is your data. So let's say the trade receivables that are to be, the sample is to be taken from the trade receivable and the total amount is what? 10 lakhs. So the units are how much? 10 lakhs. So it is a type of value weighted selection in which the sample size, the selection, and evaluation results in a conclusion in monetary amounts. Is it clear? So whether the sample size is to be decided, so or whether the selection of the sample is to be done, or whether the evaluation is to be done. Abhi tak to we are talking about the physical units, na, that 1000 transactions are there. So here everything will be done in terms of monetary amount. So when you have a data consisting of, let's say, 10 lakh rupees, so you are going to say that you have 10 lakh monetary units, and out of that, same way the procedure will be applied as we have seen for interval sampling. Is it clear? Yes, using the cumulative approach, right? So as such, in the method, you need not go. But for the purpose of your exam, just try to understand that the sampling size, the selection and the evaluation method, everything is done in monetary terms, right? Haphazard sampling, as the name suggests, haphazard. The selection of the sample is done in a without following any structured technique. So no structured technique is followed. Although no structured technique is followed, the auditor would nonetheless avoid conscious biasness or predictability. For example, avoiding difficult to locate items or always choosing or avoiding the first or last entries on a page. So here the auditor is selecting the sample on in a haphazard manner. But since he's applying his judgment now, so here he'll try that a set pattern is not followed, or it is not happening that each time only the first and the last transaction of the page gets selected, right? Simple. Haphazard sampling has no structured approach. It does not involve judgment and does not even use what? Random number table. So haphazardly, without applying any formula, without applying any judgment. But yes, auditor will make sure that auditor would nonetheless avoid any conscious bias or predictability. So consciously, he'll not include any bias. That is, he's selecting the first and the last item of every page. That he'll try to avoid. Clear? What is block sampling? This is ordinarily not used. Why? Because it basically includes that, let's say you have 1,000 transactions. So auditor will or the person will select first 200 transaction and that will become the sample. So chances are there that those continuous, see, the word is what? Contiguous. This is what? Adjacent transactions. So continuous 200 invoices I have taken. Chances are there not the characteristics of these invoices are same. So usually this is not followed. So although in some circumstances it may be an appropriate audit procedure to examine block, it would rarely be an appropriate sample selection technique when the auditor intends to draw valid inferences about the entire population based on the sample. Usually a range of continuous transaction shall have similar characteristics. Therefore, selection of a group at one time will not give reasonable basis for the opinion on the overall population. Is it clear? Is it clear? So example is what? Take the first 200 sale invoices from the sales day book in the month of September. Alternatively, take any 4 blocks of 15 invoices. So basically, therefore, once the first item of the block is selected, the rest of the block follows item to the completion. So all the transactions are checked in a continuation, right? Now, whatever sample the auditor has selected by applying whatever procedure, the auditor is, let us just quickly finish this topic because I have to cover 2 more essays today. So auditor will perform audit procedures. So you all know that whatever sample is taken, the audit procedures are applied on those sample. Whatever result is there, it is projected on the entire population. So auditor will perform appropriate procedure on each item selected. So let's say 100 items are selected, 100 line items, sales transaction selected, auditor is going to perform the audit procedure. So let's say the auditor has decided to send external confirmation to these 100 trade receivables. So auditor will do that. If audit procedure is not applicable on selected item, he will perform the audit procedure on replacement item. Let's say these are what? 100 trade receivables that auditor has selected, a sample has been taken, and auditor is sending the confirmation request to these 100 trade receivables. Now, with respect to one trade receivable, let's say the auditor sees that sending external confirmation to this trade receivable is not possible due to valid reasons of the management, right? Now, what will auditor do? He will take a replacement item. That is, he'll take another trade receivable. And now he'll send the audit, send the confirmation request to this trade receivable. So this is what? This becomes a replacement item. After getting assured that the reason that the management is giving here is valid, then he'll choose what? Replacement item. So in this case, treat such item as a deviation or misstatement. That is deviation in case of test of control and misstatement in case of test of details. Let me just take you through the module for this topic. So the first is what? The auditor shall perform audit procedure appropriate to the purpose on each item selected. If the audit procedure is not applicable to the selected item, the auditor shall perform the procedure on the replacement item. Right? So that is, he is going to select a new. For example, I'm reading the fourth point. When it is necessary to perform the procedure on the replacement item is when a cancelled check is selected while testing for evidence of payment authorization. So auditor selects a sample of 100 and out of that, one is cancelled check. If the auditor is satisfied that the check has been properly cancelled such that it does not constitute a deviation, an appropriately chosen replacement is examined. So he will examine a replacement item, right? If the auditor is unable to apply the designed audit procedures or alternative procedures on the selected item, then he'll treat it as a deviation in case of test or control or misstatement in case of the financial statement, right? So see, these are the three examples. You can just read. I'll discuss this example. So an example of when the auditor is unable to apply designed audit procedure to a selected item is when documentation relating to that item has been lost. If documentation of our sales is lost, like sales order, record, sales invoice, document for dispatch, then confirmation can be sought from debtor as per SA 505. If it is a cash sale, then cash book can be cross-verified for existence of cash transaction. So this basically says that if the auditor is unable to apply audit procedure on the selected item, then either apply the alternative procedures or apply the procedure on the selected items. And if the auditor is not able to apply that, then he is going to consider it as a deviation or a misstatement. These two examples which are given as 6 and 7, please do them as a homework. And now let's say auditor finds that there are certain misstatement or deviation. Then auditor will analyze that is there any common feature among all the deviations and the misstatement. And in such circumstances, the auditor may decide to identify all the items in the population that possesses that common feature. See, out of 1,000, let's say with respect to transactions relating to A, there were 3 transactions relating to A and there was some misstatement in these. So now what will auditor do? That out of all the 2 lakh transactions relating to A, he will identify all the items relating to A now. And he'll extend audit procedure to those items. In addition, such deviations or misstatements may be intentional and may indicate the possibility of fraud. It may happen that the transaction with A are basically A is a related party. So fraud can be there, possibility of fraud can be there. Therefore, auditor shall investigate the nature and cause of deviation, identify and evaluate the possible effect on the purpose of the audit procedure and other areas. And let's say if it is an anomaly. What is anomaly? Let us have a look at the definition. So anomaly, basically it is defined as a misstatement or deviation that is demonstrably not representative of misstatement or deviations in a population. So anomaly is what? See, basically, if the auditor selects, let's say, 100 trade receivables to whom the confirmation request is to be sent. Now, out of that, he found that with respect to one, the auditor, the management is refusing to the auditor that management is requesting the auditor that please do not send the confirmation request. Now, one situation can be whereby there is something fraudulent. So it is a misstatement, right? The second situation can be that this particular trade receivable is not representative of the entire population. It is an anomaly. It is an exceptional case, right? So auditor shall obtain degree of certainty by performing additional audit procedure to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence that the misstatement or deviation does not affect the remainder of the population. That is, with respect to the anomaly, that particular misstatement is not going to affect the rest of the population. Is it clear? Because it is an exception basically, right? Now, how the auditor is going to project the misstatement? So basically, whatever result he has obtained with respect to the sample, he will project it on the entire population. But with respect to anomaly, since it is an exception, so he will not project the result of this transaction on the entire population. But when he is calculating the total misstatement, he will consider its effect. So what is mentioned? The auditor is required to project misstatement for the population to obtain a broad view of the scale of misstatement, but this projection may not be sufficient to determine an amount to be recorded. So he will have a broader view that okay, agar 1000 में there is a mistake of 10, so 20 lakhs में कितना mistake होगा in simple terms. When a misstatement has been established as an anomaly, it may be excluded when projecting misstatement to the population. So here it will not be included when you are projecting it on the entire population. Why? Because it is an exception. But when you want to see as to what is the exact result, there so you will consider the effect of this particular exception. However, the effect of any such misstatement, if uncorrected, still needs to be considered in addition to projection of non-anomalous misstatement. So after ignoring the anomaly, whatever population is left, so you will project the result of that sample on that population. But when you have to see as to what is the total misstatement, then you will add the misstatement if uncorrected with respect to that anomaly. For test of details, the auditor shall project misstatement found in the sample to the population, whereas test of controls के लिए no explicit projection of deviation is necessary. See, misstatements में तो it is in monetary terms. Now you will say that okay, 10% out of a sample of 1000, there is a mistake of let's say 10% or 10 rupees. So 20 lakhs में कितना होगा? So this you are going to project. But when you're calculating the deviations in the internal control, तो वहां पर तो you will say 10% का deviation है on the entire internal control. You will not project as such. Is it clear? Is it clear? And then the auditor is going to evaluate the results of the audit sampling. The auditor shall evaluate the results of sample and whether the use of audit sampling has provided a reasonable basis for conclusions about the populations that has been tested. These definition of stratification, tolerable misstatement, and tolerable rate of deviation we have already understood. These test your understanding 4, 5, 6 I'm giving you as a homework, and with this we have completed the entire essay 530, whereby we started with discussing traditional approach versus the sampling. Then we saw a definition of audit sampling, population, the characteristics of population, and then sampling unit, right? And then we saw that there are various factors that determines the sample, the extent of checking. If you remember, we have done that. And then we saw various methods, that is random samplings, in interval or systematic, haphazard, monetary, and block. And then we discussed about the performing of audit procedure, nature, cause, deviation of and misstatement, and projecting the misstatement and evaluating the results. We also discussed about the sample sign and the sample design, right? So I hope that essay 530 is clear. Still you have any doubt, you can always send in the queries, and here we will take a quick break of 10 minutes. After the break, I'll be starting with essay 501. So send in your queries if any, and let's take a break of 10 minutes. IT start करें. So students, I hope you all are back after the break. So now we'll be starting with essay 501, which is audit evidence, specific considerations for selected items. Essay 501, audit evidence, specific consideration for selected items. So in this essay, we will be discussing about three selected items, with respect to which certain provisions are contained in essay 501. So the three items are inventory, litigation and claims, and segment information. And with respect to inventory, more particularly about existence and condition of inventory, completeness of litigation and claims, presentation and disclosure of segment information in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. So this standard, it basically helps the auditor in obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to existence and condition of inventory, completeness of litigation and claims, presentation disclosure of segment information in accordance with the applicable FRF. Is it clear? Right? So it deals with, essay 501 deals with specific consideration by the auditor in obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to certain aspects. What are those certain aspects? These of selected items are what? Inventory, litigation and claims, and segment information. So what is the objective of the auditor in terms of SF 501? To obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding existence, condition of inventory, completeness of litigation claim, presentation, disclosure of segment information in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. I hope it is clear. Now, see, so basically, see, this is the management of the client organization. This is what the inventory of the client. So whose responsibility is to perform the physical inventory count of the inventory? It is that of the management. So these are employees of the management who are conducting the physical inventory count of the client, and the instructions with respect to physical inventory count is given by the management itself, right? So what is the objective of the auditor, or what is the duty of the auditor here? Auditor will oversee. If you remember, we have discussed about one of the audit procedure of observation, which is what? Looking at the process. So auditor will look at the process which has been performed by the client officials, client employees, as per the instructions given by the management, right? Now, SA 501 says that the auditor has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to inventory if the same is what? Material. We all have studied the concept of materiality in SA 320. So auditor is going to attend the physical inventory count if he finds it material. Now, when the auditor attends the physical inventory count, so it says that auditor will attend unless impracticable. So what to do if it is impracticable? That we are going to study just after this topic. So when the auditor is going to attend the physical inventory count, will he just go and stand there? That's it? No. What is he going to perform? I told you when I was discussing with you this diagram that the management is going to give certain instruction to these employees, and these employees are going to follow these instructions when they are going to conduct the physical inventory count. So when the auditor is attending the physical inventory count, he will evaluate the management's instruction and procedure for recording and controlling the results of entities' physical inventory count. So certain instructions must be given to these two persons, that this is the procedure that is to be followed for conducting the physical inventory count, and this is the procedure of how to record the result of the physical inventory count. So let us read that line again. evaluate the management's instructions and procedure for recording and controlling the results of entities' physical inventory count. Is it clear? Then auditor will observe the performance of management's count procedure. He will observe. He will inspect the inventory. So auditor may ask the management that, okay, with respect to this particular, let's say, corner, I'll also inspect the inventory along with your officials. And he will perform test counts. So the inventory that has been that is counted by the management's official or the client's official. So auditor can also say that I'll also test count these inventories, right? And he will perform audit procedure over the entity's final inventory records to determine whether they accurately reflect the actual inventory count results. So when these persons are conducting the physical inventory count, there must be the actual results of the physical inventory count, and certain inventory must be mentioned in the inventory register or the inventory records. So he will see whether these are in tally or not, like they are agreeing with each other or not, both the records, right? So let us read it again. So auditor will obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the existence condition of inventory by attendance at physical inventory counting unless impracticable to. If it is impracticable, we will see as to what is to be done. He will evaluate the management's instruction procedure for recording and controlling the results of physical inventory count. Observe the performance of management's count procedure. He'll inspect the inventory and perform test count and perform audit procedure over the entity's final inventory records to determine whether they accurately reflect the actual inventory count results, right? So you can just read this attendance as physical inventory count. Read this as a homework as to what is all included when the auditor is attending the physical inventory count. He'll inspect, he'll observe, he'll obtain audit evidence, right? And see this line. These procedure may serve as test of control, because you all know that it is what? The internal control of the organization. What is internal control? The physical inventory count or substantive procedure. So he may check the inventory by attending the physical inventory count, depending upon the auditor's risk assessment and the planned approach and the specific procedure carried out. So you all are aware that procedures remain the same, but the context in which the same has been used will determine whether it is test of control or substantive procedure. Now, what are the matters relevant in planning the attendance as the physical inventory count? So, see, when the auditor is planning the attendance, so planning includes everything now, who all are going to go for the physical inventory count. What should be the experience of the team that is going? How many members should be there? At what time? At what location? Each and everything will come in planning. So, relating to planning, all these points the auditor is going to consider, right? So, matters relevant in planning attendance. So, planning attendance does not only mean that whether to go or not. It means who all are going to go. So, see nature of the inventory. So, let's say the inventory is diamonds. And the team of the auditor, the team consists of one of the person, audit team member who has an experience in auditing the diamond companies in the diamond industry. So nature of the inventory, right? Stages of completion of the work in progress. Risk of material misstatement related to inventory. Nature of internal control related to inventory. So when the auditor is analyzing or he's deciding the planning, he's planning the attendance at a physical inventory count, he'll consider all these factors: nature of inventory, stages of completion of work in progress, risk of material misstatement, nature of internal control, whether adequate procedure are expected to be established or proper instruction based on physical inventory count, the timing of physical inventory counting. Whether the entities maintain a perpetual inventory count. See, what is perpetual inventory count? Like the continuous inventory count you see in grocery stores. The moment the material is sold, it gets automatically updated, or the inventory system is such that continuous recording of the sales is there. So whether the entity is maintaining such perpetual inventory count, the locations at which the inventory is held. Let's say the inventory is held at a number of locations. So considering the materiality, he may send his experienced team member to that location where material inventory is kept. So the location at which inventory is kept, including the materiality of the inventory and the risk of material misstatement at different locations in deciding at which location attendance is appropriate. Whether the assistance of the expert is required. Again, take example of diamonds. So whether the expert assistant is also to be taken. So this is with respect to the various matters that the auditor is going to consider when he's going to plan about the attendance. Now, if the physical inventory counting is conducted at a date other than the financial date. So let's say the auditor is conducting the audit of the financials for the year ending 31st March 2022. So inventory is going to come on this date, inventory as on 31st March 2022. But let's say the client is conducting the physical inventory count at a date other than the date of financial statement, let's say 15th March. So what will auditor do? Auditor will attend the inventory on this date, 15th March ko. He'll attend the inventory, plus he'll evaluate, he'll observe, he'll inspect, he'll perform test count. That all he's going to do. Plus, auditor will obtain audit evidence whether changes in inventory between the count date, that is this date, and the date of financial statement, that is this date, that is transactions here, whether these are properly recorded or not. Simple. Na? So he'll attend the inventory count on the alternative day whenever the company is conducting the physical inventory count, and he'll perform the above procedures as we have discussed. That is attendance, evaluation, inspection, observation, and test counts, plus see whether if inventory counts, actual and records are tallying or not. Plus, just a minute. So let me just take you... Plus, auditor is going to consider the following, right? So whether the perpetual inventory records are properly adjusted. So if the perpetual records are there, so with respect to these 15-day transaction, whether the records are properly updated, reliability of the entity's perpetual accounting record. So he'll also see the reliability and reasons for significant differences between the information obtained during the physical count and perpetual inventory record. So if there is a difference between the actual and the perpetual, then what is the reason? So auditor is going to consider that. This topic is given on page number 4.70. Now, if unable to attend the inventory count due to unforeseen circumstances. So if the auditor is unable to attend the inventory count, it is happening on a particular date, but he or his team is unable to attend it due to, let's say, some unforeseen circumstances. So what will auditor do? Auditor will make or observe some physical counts on an alternative day. So on the day on which the physical inventory count was being conducted by the management, on that day, because of some unforeseen circumstances, let's say there was some curfew, so auditor was not able to reach there. So he was not able to attend it. So make or observe the physical inventory count on an alternate day. And for the intervening period, let's say the inventory count happened on 31st March. He could not attend. So on 5th April, if he is performing the count, and then for these intervening transaction, let's say on 5th April, he requested the management that management please get it conducted on some other day also. So management agreed and conducted it on 5th April. So attend it here. And for the intervening transaction, the auditor will see whether the same has been duly accounted for or not. Now, let's say if the attendance at physical inventory count is impracticable. So it may be situated at a place which is not safe, or there are threats to safety of the audit team. So in that case, perform alternative procedure. And if the inventory is material and the auditor is not able to perform the alternative procedure, then the ultimate option available for an auditor is to modify the opinion, right? Now, essay 200, if you remember, we have seen that there were various inherent limitations of audit, right? Now it says that the matter of general inconvenience to the auditor is not sufficient to support a decision by the auditor that attendance is impracticable. So let's say the auditor says that the inventory is kept in the state of Sikkim. My team has no time and we are not able to attend. So see, general inconvenience is there, then it is not sufficient to support a decision by the auditor that attendance is impracticable. So what is meant by impracticable? When there are what threats to the safety of the auditor. So this example is given in your module, right? Further, in some cases, when the attendance is impracticable, so auditor cannot say that I am not able to audit the inventory and I will not give, or my opinion is restricted to other items of the financial statement and it is not with respect to the inventory. No. Why? Because the opinion is on the financial statement also on the as a whole. So in some cases where attendance is impracticable, alternative audit procedures, for example, so auditor was not able to attend inventory count. So he may perform alternative audit procedures like inspection of documentation of the subsequent sale of specific inventory items acquired or purchased prior to physical inventory count. So this is the date where the physical inventory count was done. Auditor was not able to attend it. So certain material was purchased here and the same was sold here. So consider the documents with respect to that material. Okay, that may provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence about the existence and condition of the inventory. Now, the last situation, see, these form a very good question for your practical based questions. So you may get a question that you are the auditor of XYZ and Associates and the inventory is lying with the warehouse keeper, the third party. So what all audit procedures the auditor needs to perform? So he will request the confirmation from the third party with respect to the quantity and the condition. So auditor will what? Send a confirmation request and he'll perform inspection and other procedures. So he'll perform the inspection of that, let's say, warehouse where the inventory is kept. Let's say it is not practically possible for the auditor to perform inspection. Then he may perform various other audit procedures. So what are those procedures? Inspecting the documentation regarding inventory held by third party, for example, warehouse receipts. Requesting confirmation from other parties where inventory has been pledged as collateral. So if the inventory has been pledged as a security, as a collateral, he may ask the third party to provide the written confirmation. Attending or arranging for another auditor to attend the third party's physical accounting or inventory if practicable. So if first of all it was saying to perform the inspection, that is to go by himself and inspect the inventory, or otherwise to perform other audit procedure which includes inspection of documents like the warehouse receipts. If the inventory is collateral, then asking for the confirmation from the third parties, or either by himself he'll attend or he'll arrange some other auditor to attend the third party's physical inventory count if practicable, right? And last, obtaining another auditor's report or service auditor's report. So the report of the warehouse, the report of the auditor of the warehouse. So service auditor's report or the other auditor's report on the adequacy of third party's internal control for ensuring that inventory is properly counted and adequately safeguarded. So students, earlier in the old scheme, these other procedures were not given. So as such, if you see them, these are really very, very important from your examination point of view. So what are the other procedures? Inspecting the documentation regarding inventory held by third parties, for example, warehouse receipts. If the inventory is kept as has been pledged as collateral, then requesting the confirmation from other parties. Attending or arranging another auditor to attend the third party's physical inventory count, and obtaining the other auditor's report or the service auditor's report on the adequacy of third party's internal control. Because if any physical inventory count has been conducted there, it is one of the internal control of that third party for ensuring that the inventory is properly counted and adequately safeguarded. I hope with this, the points relating to inventory, that is, first of all, what the auditor has to do, he has to attend and then he has to perform certain procedure. Then we saw that if it is not, if the inventory count has been happening on a date other than the balance sheet date, then perform all these procedures that we have discussed, plus intervening time के लिए just see whether the records have been duly updated or not, and he'll see that whether system is perpetual inventory recording system is reliable or not, whether transactions are properly recorded, and if there are difference, what are the reason. If he is unable to attend, then observe it on some alternative day and perform the audit procedure for the intervening transactions. And if it is impracticable, perform alternative procedure. And if it is not possible, then modify the opinion. See, it is mentioned here that nature or location of inventory, where the inventory is in a location which may pose threat to the safety of the auditor. So there it may be impracticable, but general inconvenience is not a reason or it is not sufficient to support a decision by the auditor that attendance is impracticable. And what alternative procedure? So here also example of alternative procedure is there, that is subsequent sale of the inventory which is purchased prior to the physical inventory, and if it is kept at third party, these are the procedures the auditor may perform. Now, with respect to litigations and claims. So what are the audit procedures? So auditor will design and perform the audit procedure to identify the litigation and claims that give rise to the risk of material misstatement. See, auditor here wants to know about the completeness of the litigation and claim, that whether any litigation claim is there which is not disclosed, or is there any risk of material misstatement associated with litigation or claim. What is meant by risk of material misstatement? That let's say some provision was to be made, but the management has not made that provision. So any risk of material misstatement associated with the litigation or claim. So within an organization, there must be some in-house legal department. So inquire the management or the in-house legal counsel. So we are here talking about in-house within the organization, because with respect to external legal counsel, there are separate provisions that we are going to discuss. So auditor will inquire. Again, very good questions for your practical situation, that you have gone for the audit of so and so company, and you saw there are a number of litigations. So what audit procedures will you design and perform? So inquire with management or the in-house legal counsel, review the minutes of the meeting of those charged with governors and the external legal counsel. See, minutes of the meeting may every details will be mentioned now, and review the legal expense account. Let's say legal expense account may there were many payments that were made to various solicitors or advocates, right? And auditor is aware about, let's say he's aware about the payments that are made to these three solicitors. Now, he is not aware about any litigation why this 50,000 has been paid. So here he can ask the management now, why this 50,000 has been paid? What is the litigation? You have not disclosed me the litigation. So that is why reviewing the legal expense account and perform other procedures. So then it says that if auditor assesses a risk of material misstatement or other material litigation exists, then what is to be done? See, the first and foremost, what auditor is going to do with respect to the completeness of litigation and claims, he'll inquire the in-house legal counsel and the management. He'll review the minutes of the meetings of those charged with governance and external legal counsel, and he'll review the legal expense account. Now, when he is going through all that, auditor understands that he assesses a risk of material misstatement. What is meant by that? That with respect to any particular litigation, the information that has been shown, or I gave example that provision was required to be made, but the same has not been made by the management, or other material litigation exists. Suppose 49 litigation cases the management has disclosed, one more is there which is not disclosed. So if a material litigation exists, then what will auditor do? He will perform and seek direct communication with the entity's external legal counsel. I told you that here we are talking about in-house legal counsel, the legal department that is there within the company. So here we are talking about the external legal counsel. So he will obtain direct communication with the entity's legal counsel through a letter of inquiry. But let's say, suppose the Bar Council of India or whatever is the relevant association of the external legal counsel, it prohibits them from discussing the client's matter with anyone. See, the way we have confidentiality clause that we should not discuss our client's information with the third party except as it required by law and regulation. So it might be possible na that their respective professional body also prohibit the external counsel, then in that case perform the alternative audit procedures, right? Now, auditor here, what he has done, he has sent a letter of inquiry, a general inquiry, that tell me what all litigations are going on, right? But let's say that other the professional body has it prohibits the external counsel, and the external counsel did not respond. So what is the alternative available? That perform other alternative procedures, obtain written representation from management, or whatever other alternative procedure are fine as per the situation, right? Now, let's say if auditor wants to make a specific inquiry from the external legal counsel, so they are not replying to the general query letter, general inquiry letter. Why? Because the professional body has prohibited the external legal counsel. So what is the rescue available to the auditor? He may send a specific inquiry letter to the external legal counsel. So it is considered unlikely that entity's external legal counsel will respond to general inquiry. So chances are less. Why? Because the professional body prohibit. So in that case, auditor can seek a direct communication through a specific inquiry. So here what auditor is going to do, he is going to make a specific inquiry letter whereby he himself is going to mention a list of litigation and claims. Right? So here we are not asking the external legal counsel that please tell us what is the list. We are sending a list, right? Wherever available, management's assessment of the outcome of each of the identified litigation and claims and its estimate of the financial implication, including the cost involved. So the list will be serially numbered, having the details of the whatever are the claims and litigations, and what is the management's view. That management is saying यहाँ पर 1 CR का provision is to be made, और यहाँ पे no liability will be there, और यहाँ पे let's say 10 lakhs का payment can be expected. So management का what is the word? The management assessment of the outcome, right? And a request. Now, a request will be there that the entity's external legal counsel confirm the reasonableness of management assessments and provide the auditor with further information if the list considered by entity's external legal counsel is incomplete or incorrect. Right? So here specific inquiry has been made that, okay, this is the list of litigation and claim. This is the management's concern. External legal counsel, you cannot reply to general inquiry because your professional body prohibit. You do one thing. So auditor is requesting that you just confirm the reasonableness of management's assessment and tell us if this list is incomplete or incorrect. So this is what a specific inquiry, right? Now, auditor may find it necessary, may judge it necessary to meet the entity's external legal counsel. When will auditor find it necessary? When there is what? Significant risk. When the matter is complex, and when there is disagreement between the management and the external legal counsel. Let's say here the auditor receives a reply from the external legal counsel, but management is saying something else and they are saying something else. So there is a disagreement. So here the auditor may decide that it is necessary to meet the entity's external legal counsel. But again, students, auditor is a professional person, so he will need management's permission that, okay, management, these are your views. Just give us a letter of permission that we can meet the external legal counsel, and also in presence of the representative of management in attendance along with the auditor, one person, one representative of the management will be going to meet the external legal counsel. And let's say if management refuses the permission that you cannot meet, or the external legal counsel also, or the external legal counsel refuses to respond even to specific inquiry also, then How will auditor obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence? By performing alternative procedure. But still auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. What is the ultimate option that is available? To modify the opinion as per SA 705. Really very, very important. A number of changes have been made here. So this specific inquiry thing, this is also there in the new scheme also. So a very, very important point. So litigation and claims में क्या है? Student, though I wanted to complete 3 essays today, but I can see that only 2 essays will be covered today. So I'll do one thing, I'll lower my speed so that this topic, which is really very, very important, you are able to understand it and learn it. Just a minute. So, chalo, I'll take Swati, I'll take your doubt later on. First, let me just continue this. So when the auditor is, he has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence with respect to completeness of litigation and claims. So first of all, though, he'll identify that any litigation or claim is there which give rise to risk of material misstatement. He'll inquire the management in-house legal counsel, review the minutes of the meeting of those charged with governance and external legal counsel, and review the legal expense account and perform other procedures. So example of other procedure is given in your module, which is what? Using information obtained through risk assessment procedures carry out as part of understanding the entity and its environment to assist the entity to become aware of litigation claims involving the entity. So it basically says that if the auditor has obtained any information while he was performing the risk assessment procedure, that information can also be used here, as simple as that, right? Then it says that now if auditor identifies that risk of material misstatement is there with respect to any of the litigation, or any other material litigation is there which is not shown by the management. In this case, what will auditor do? He'll perform other procedures, plus he'll seek direct communication with the entity's external legal counsel. Why? Because management, whatever information management has given, that is not correct, or the risk of material misstatement assessed is high. How will he communicate? Through a letter of inquiry. But if the professional body prohibits the external legal counsel to respond, then he'll perform alternative procedures, right? Now, it is unlikely that the external legal counsel will respond to general inquiry. So what is the option available? He can seek direct communication through specific inquiry, mentioning a list of litigation claims, management's assessment as to identify litigation in claim का क्या outcome हो सकता है, estimate हो सकता है, and the cost, and a request to the external legal counsel that please confirm the reasonableness of the management assessment, and also see that if the list that is provided is what? Incomplete or incorrect. Right? Now, if the auditor judge it necessary that it is necessary to meet the entity's external legal counsel, why? Cases can be what? When auditor assesses that it is a significant risk. It can be auditor has an understanding that some fraud is involved. So significant risk, है ना? Matter is complex, or there is a disagreement between the management and external legal counsel. Then auditor may meet the entity's external legal counsel directly, but management का permission भी चाहिए and representative of the management भी चाहिए. If the management refuses, or let's say the external legal counsel also refuses, so how to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence? See, auditor cannot say that मेरे को audit evidence नहीं मिला, I'll not give my opinion. Auditor will have to obtain he will have to perform alternative procedures, and if that is also not possible, then modify the opinion as per SA 705. Clear? And with this, auditor can always obtain, whenever we say auditor will perform alternative procedures, so he can obtain written representation. SA 580 we will be discussing, then we will see about written representation. So he can obtain written representation from the management that all known actual or possible litigation and claims has been disclosed to the auditor, and they have been appropriately accounted for and disclosed as per the applicable financial reporting framework. Is it clear? So two aspects we have covered. One is with respect to existence condition of inventory. Second is with respect to completeness of your segment information. Quickly tell me, is it clear? And see, Swati, perpetual inventory record is basically the continuous inventory record that is maintained by the organization or the client organization. So when the inventory count is done, so what happens is the in and out is stopped. Then the inventory count is taken place. So physical inventory count to hota hi hai. So that the auditor is going to attend. Swati, is your doubt clear? Is your doubt clear? Now the next part is with respect to the presentation disclosure of the segment information. Now what is segment information? Ind AS 108 is there, but for the purpose of your audit and ethics, this subject, so you just need to understand that. See, if a company is having a number of segments like your Reliance, it is in Geo, it is in jewels, it is in let's say clothing also, it is in home appliances also. So the segment information refers to the information about different types of products and services of an enterprise, its operation in different geographical areas. So based on the product and services or based on the operations in the different geographical area, so various segments are there, right? Now, what is the responsibility of the auditor? So we as an auditor, we are not required to give our opinion on the various segments as such, but we have to give an opinion on the financial statement as a whole. And Ind AS 108 requires that certain presentation and disclosure is required for the segments, right? So first of all, what are the audit procedures? Auditor will obtain an understanding of the methods, how the segment information is divided, what are the various methods, right? He will evaluate the methods and result whether the methods that the company is following, whether it result in the disclosure as required by applicable FRF. And he'll also test the application of such methods. So let us just have a look at it from your module also. So whatever illustrations are coming, I'm giving all these as the homework today. So we are on page number 4.76. Okay. So see, auditor will obtain an understanding of the methods used by the management in determining the segment information and evaluating whether such methods are likely to result in disclosure as per the applicable FRF, and where appropriate, testing the application of such methods and performing analytical procedure or other audit procedure appropriate in the circumstances. Analytical procedures, so now you all must be aware na, that comparing the data with the earlier years, calculating various ratios, analysis, trend analysis, everything auditor is going to perform. Now, when we say that auditor is going to understand the methods, what is meant by understanding the method? So auditor will consider whether such methods are likely to result in disclosure in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. So that understanding will include the understanding of various matters like, see, whenever there are segments, right, that are there in the company, so inter-segment transaction must be there, right? Allocation of cost must be there. Assets, cost must be there, right? So auditor is going to consider that only. Budgets must have been prepared. With the prior period, auditor is going to check compare the data with the prior period. So sales transfer charges between segments, elimination of basically the inter-segments amounts. Relating to this is a point, allocation of assets cost among the segments. Simple. Second and fourth point are kind of related. Comparison between budgets and the other expected results. For example, operating profits as a percentage of sale. And the fourth point is consistency with prior period, the adequacy of disclosure with respect to the inconsistencies. So whether with respect to prior periods, consistency is there or not, and if not, then whether the disclosure are adequate or not. So with this, our SA 501 is also completed. Quickly tell me, is it clear? And in case of any query, just let me know. Swati, is your doubt clear? Swati is saying yes, ma'am. Bhumika is saying yes. Om Krishna Om. Komalpreet is saying clear. Okay. So I'll do one thing. I'll start with this essay 505. I'll just give you an idea as to what is it. It is one of the very simple essays. So segment information, this we have seen, right? And see, auditor's responsibility with respect to presentation, disclosure of segment information. It basically says, this I have told you earlier also, Hana, when I started with this topic. So the auditor's responsibility regarding presentation, disclosure of segment information is taken in relation to financial statement taken as a whole. Accordingly, the auditor is not required to perform audit procedure that would be necessary to express an opinion on the segment information presented on the standalone basis. So whether the information in the financial statement as a whole, the segment information, whether it has been presented, disclosed as per the applicable FRF, auditor is going to consider that. Okay. So now is SA 505, which is what? External confirmation. Okay. So see, students, I always give you example. Now, auditor will send what? External confirmation to the trade receivables, to the trade payables. So what is that? This is external confirmation. So if you remember, when we did the concept of SA 500 and more specifically about the reliability of audit evidence, we saw that the reliability of audit evidence is influenced by the source, nature, and the circumstances. And if it is internally generated by the internal controls. I hope you all remember, right? And the reliability of audit evidence is increased when it is acquired from an independent source, when it is obtained directly by the auditor, and when it is in a documentary form. So reliability is increased. Remember, quickly send in your replies. ये सब याद है ना, हमने last session में किया था. Quickly send in your replies. Bhumika, Sunil, Gangadev, Swati, Sukaina, Praveen, Om, Krishna. Send in your replies. So all of you are saying yes. Chalo, theek. All these features, that is independent source, obtained directly by the auditor and in documentary form, are available in external confirmation. So SA 505 is there, which deals with the auditor's use of external confirmation procedures to obtain audit evidence in accordance with the requirements of SA 500, right? So SA 500 is with respect to what? Audit evidence. SA 505, it basically deals with the audit procedures that the auditor can perform. And 505 is with respect to what? External confirmation procedure. So what is the objective of the auditor? Then when he's using the external confirmation procedure, he'll design and perform those procedures in such a way so as to obtain the relevant, reliable audit evidence. Simple. Now let us just have a look at the definition of the external confirmation, and then I will end the topic for today. So external confirmation. So basically what is happening, for example, there are various trade receivables. So on a there are, let's say, 10,000 trade receivables. So auditor select a sample of 100 out of these, and to these 100, auditor is sending a request. A request is been sent to these parties that please tell us what is the balance of our client in your books. So this is one way that blank confirmation request is sent, that you tell us what is the balance. Or the other way can be, please tell us whether 2 lakhs is the balance or not. So here you are mentioning the balance, right? So audit evidence. So there is one more kind of confirmation that I'll be taking up in the next session. So it is audit evidence obtained as a direct written response. So it is obtained directly by the auditor in the written form to the auditor from a third party, which is what? The confirming party. Your trade receivables, trade payables. It can be in paper form, electronic form, or any other medium, right? So let us just try to have a look at this definition again. Audit evidence obtained as a direct written response. To whom? To the auditor. From whom? From a third party who is the confirming party in paper, electronic, or any other medium. Students, when we will be studying in the next session, which is the last session for this chapter, we will see that confirmation request can be of two types: positive confirmation request and negative confirmation request. I'm just summarizing this so that next session may takes less time, because we have 3 more essays to cover in the next session. So confirmation requests can be positive confirmation request or negative confirmation request. Then there is a concept of non-response. The response is not received, or an exception. That is the information that is there in the client's books of account. It is different from what is mentioned in the response. Okay? Now, when the auditor is performing the external confirmation procedure, there are 4 steps the auditor needs to follow. See, first of all, he'll determine what information is to be confirmed. So whether he wants to confirm the balance, that what is the balance, or he wants to confirm the terms of the contract, or he wants to just confirm the various transactions that has happened during the year. So what is the information that is to be confirmed? Then who is the confirming party, from whom it is to be confirmed? Like within the client itself, who is the person to whom the confirmation request to be sent? Then he'll design the confirmation request. Ab design karna hai na, because design determines na. See, if you get a letter jisme handwritten it is written, please confirm what is the amount, and vis-a-vis a letter which is typed, and the authorization from the management is also mentioned. So the design of the confirmation request is going to influence the response rate. है ना, सामने वाला person whether he or she is going to respond or not. And then he is going to see that the confirmation should be properly addressed, and then follow up of the confirmation request. If the answer is not received within the response is not received within the reasonable time, then there should be some follow up. Now, chances can be there that when the auditor asks the management that management, these are the 100 trade receivables to whom we want to send the confirmation request, then please help us in this process. Now, management says that with respect to so and so trade receivable, now please do not send any confirmation request. So there can be 2 situations. Either the reason of the management can be valid, or either it cannot be valid. So if it is valid, let's say some dispute is going on. So what procedures the auditor can perform? If it is not valid, what are the implications on the audit? Right? So these are the topics. And then negative confirmation request. What is negative confirmation request? I will discuss in the next session. And then there are certain situation whereby the negative confirmation request auditor may send. Otherwise, it is advisable that auditor should send what? Positive confirmation request. So what are the situation where the auditor can send the negative confirmation request? So, and after the confirmations are received, he will evaluate the evidence that he has obtained, and what can be the various kind of responses that he may obtain. So it may be a response jahan everything is fine, like whatever auditor has mentioned, the same reply has been received. A response which is unreliable, maybe the reliable person has not sent it. A non-response, a response hasn't been received. A response indicating an exception, that is the information which is there in the books of accounts of the management is different from what the response is there. Okay. So these are the various topics. I've given you just an idea why. Now, why I have given you an idea, because I want you all to go through this essay from the module before coming for the session, because I have told you that this is a very, very important topic, and we are left with 3 more important essays that I want to cover in the next session, because next session is the only session for this chapter, right? So please go through these topics, and this is a very small essay, not lengthy one, and very simple also. So your homework for today is till page number 4.87. See, today we have done 2 essays in entirety: essay 530 audit sampling, essay 501 relating to specific consideration for selected items, right? Now, essay 505, which is what external confirmation, I have given you a brief as to what is contained. And since these are the revisionary classes, I expect and assume that you all are as such aware about what is contained in essay 505, right? So the homework for you is till page number 4.87. You need to go through the module, and more specifically essay 530, 501, 505, along with all the test your understanding and illustration questions that are given in your module, because considering the paucity of time, I won't be able to take up all the questions, right? Yes, I assure you that I'll be covering the maximum and the important topics, and in fact all topics. 1 or 2 topics only I've asked you to do as a homework, right? So before coming for the session, go through the entire module. And as I always say that now we are on chapter number 4. So chapter number 1, 2, 3 should be on your tips. Why? Because these are revisionary classes. Then only you can take the full advantage of these classes. So before coming for next session, chapter number 4 to padna hi hai. 1, 2, 3 ko bhi you just need to flip on the pages to revise, because this is the revision stage for all of you, right? So I hope you are able to understand why I'm trying to convince you again and again to go through all the chapters, whatever we have done so far, right? So before coming for the next session, surely you will have to do essay 501, 505 and 530, right? So thank you, students, for making this session very interactive. See you in the next session, which is the last session for this chapter, right? And after that, we'll be starting with chapter number 5. So thank you and bye-bye.